Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first session in our Soybean Innovation Lab Multi-Crop Thresher webinar symposium on performance. My name is Amy Karyanagis. I'm the Communications Manager for the Soybean Innovation Lab and will be your moderator today. Today's webinar is sponsored by the Feed the Future Soybean Innovation Lab, focused on improving soybean production and utilization across sub-Saharan Africa. Today, we are joined by registrants from 36 different countries, representing organizations within the private sector, academia, development agencies, and research institutions. So glad you could all be with us today. Before we begin, I would like to give everyone a quick overview of the GoToWebinar software, which you can use to ask questions and access webinar resources. Whether you're using the desktop or web application, you'll see a questions pane on your control panel. Please type in your questions as they arise, along with your organization and country. We will collect all of your questions and address as many as possible during the question and answer session at the end. Questions that are not answered during the webinar will receive a written response after the webinar has concluded. On your GoToWebinar control panel, you'll also see a handouts pane. Expand this pane to access important handouts and the webinar presentation in its entirety. Depending on your connectivity, you may experience a lag in the transition of slides. This presentation is available as a PDF in your handouts pane, so feel free to download it now and you can follow along at your own pace. I'd also like to note that today's webinar is being recorded and a copy of the recording will be sent to you following the webinar. Now I'd like to introduce you to our panelists. We have the Soybean Innovation Lab Mechanization Lead, Dr. Carrie Clark, with us today. Dr. Clark is the Director of International Programs for the College of Agriculture, Food, and Natural Resources at the University of Missouri. Thank you for joining us today, Carrie.
Thank you.
We also have the CEO and founder of Sayatech, Jeffrey Apiaje, joining us from Kumasi, Ghana today. Thank you for taking the time to be with us today, Jeffrey.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Amy.
So before we get started, I'd like to launch our first interactive poll. We use these polls as a way to get your feedback and to get a better understanding of our audience. So for our first poll, we'd like to know a little more about who's joining us today. Please identify which category best describes where you work. We'll give everyone a few moments to record their answer. Okay, and we'll be closing the polls in 3, 2, 1. All right. Let's show those results here. All right, so good range here today. Thanks everyone for your feedback. This is good to know. It's always nice to get a little background on the attendees joining us for each webinar, so thank you. All right, and so with that, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Clark and Mr. Apiaje. Carrie, feel free to begin whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Amy, and thank you everybody for joining today. The Soybean Innovation Lab, or SIL, started work to address gaps in the soybean value chain back in 2014. We quickly realized that the reliance on hand threshing using stick beating was a major bottleneck in soybean adoption for smallholder and nucleus farmers. Stick threshing leads to high contamination with dirt and rocks, and it's an extremely labor-intensive and energy-expensive task. The work often falls to women and children who are often removed from school to participate. We couldn't find plans for soybean or multi-crop threshers published anywhere, so in 2016, we started a program of development, field testing, and training to transform soybean production in Africa from the photo on the right, where threshing takes weeks of stick beating, to the photo on the left, where threshing time is reduced from weeks to mere hours, and the output is a cleaner, more valuable product. Feedback from communities in Ghana determined that a thresher model large enough to be profitable for service providers was the preferred technology. Thus, the SIL Multi-Crop Thresher is built and sized for larger farmers or operators who provide service to smallholders for a set fee. Threshing service provision is also an excellent way for rural youth to find work in their communities and to build profitable businesses after they have finished with school. Next. The thing that makes this a multi-crop thresher is its easily accessible and interchangeable concave sieve that's switched out for different crops. Generally, 2 different sieves can be used to service most crops. The thresher is similar to most maize shellers found in Africa, and it uses beater bar technology. Thresher speed is controlled with engine speed and pulley sizes, and it has 2 suction fans to remove chaff, resulting in a clean, highly valued product. Next. The SIL Multi-Crop Thresher can be used for maize, soybean, millet, rice, cowpea, common bean, pigeon pea, barley, wheat, sunflower, and others. The only crop we've tried and been unsuccessful with is groundnut, as it shells the groundnut but also breaks the fragile seeds due to the thin seed coat. It can also thresh small grains such as sesame, teff, chia, and fonio, but because of the small size and weights of those seeds, the operator would need to eliminate winnowing in the machine to prevent seeds being removed from chaff through the suction fans. Next. The cost of the machine ranges throughout the continent, with price driven by the cost of raw materials in each country, and with raw material costs being largely driven by demand and costs of transport and taxes. When we first started this in 2018, the thresher could be made for less than $2,500, but due to cost of living increases, the SIL multi-crop thresher now has selling prices from $3,000 to $5,500, depending on location and whether or not you get monitoring hardware and software. While that's costly, it's much less expensive than imports with similar capacity from China, India, and Brazil. Those imports tend to range from $8,000 to $30,000. Next. SIL is definitely not the only organization providing thresher technology in Africa, but we are one of the few with a heavy emphasis on local fabrication and workforce training. SIL provides an open source design that has been developed into a 100-page fabrication manual, and we work with local organizations to improve fabrication capacity in many countries. Additionally, funding from the ADM Institute for Prevention of Postharvest Loss and USAID has enabled us to conduct research on thresher profitability, service provision, and scalability. Some of that research will be presented in the following 2 webinars today. We hope that our research and efforts will help drive support for all programs supporting local fabrication of agricultural equipment. Currently, many African fabricators produce maize and groundnut shellers. There are also other multi-crop threshers available in Africa, such as this one in the photo produced by Imaratech in Tanzania. With its smaller size, it's easily transportable on a motorcycle and less expensive than the SIL model, but also has lower throughput capacity. IITA and Africa Rice also have thresher models that are capable of multiple crop threshing. Next. Because SIL believes that local fabrication is vital for lower cost, improved economic opportunity, and increased employment, we believe in supporting all African thresher manufacturers. Good ideas exist everywhere and should be supported. An example is this thresher seen in Ghana that has been integrated into the body of a cargo motorcycle for easier transport. Next. The SIL multi-crop thresher was designed by a rural Ghanaian fabricator with 15 years experience in manufacturing and field testing. This is Amoro Domoa, the man in the middle of the photo. He's joined by 2 other Ghanaian designers who have significantly contributed to the evolution of the design and to training of a workforce across Africa. They are Hakeem Karim from Ghana and Jeffrey Apiage, owner of Sayatech and my co-presenter today, pictured on the right. Next. Some important thresher specs. We use a crank-type diesel engine, 18 to 24 horsepower. The machine consumes about 1/2 to 1 liter of fuel per hour, depending on operating speed. Machine capacity depends on the speed of the humans feeding it and the size and weight of the grain that's being threshed. Maize and rice have the fastest throughput with a capacity of approximately 2 to 3.5 tons per hour. Sorghum, millet, and beans are slightly reduced at 1.5 to 2 tons per hour, and soybean is the slowest at an average of 280 kilograms per hour. This is because soybean is the only crop where the entire plant is fed into the machine, a process that slows down feeding and lowers capacity significantly. You'll find that soybean threshing has reduced capacity compared to maize in all thresher models that are found around the world. Jeffrey's company, Sayatech, has made design modifications that increase soybean capacity, which they've incorporated into their company's models. However, that is proprietary technology and not included in the SIL design. All companies are welcome to make modifications and improvements to the design for their own use, although we encourage them to not make changes that would decrease thresher safety or performance. Next. A few more specifics on the engine. This is a crank start diesel engine with significant power, some of which is augmented by the large flywheel attached to it. Do not utilize engines that don't have this heavy flywheel integrated into the design, or they will not be able to run at the proper RPMs for the machine. The engine is water cooled and can better handle 10 hours running in the heat if you purchase a model with a radiator. These engines are common throughout Africa and are used on two-wheel tractors and as irrigation pumps. There's significant price difference on the engine in local markets, ranging from $700 in West Africa to $2,500 in the landlocked countries in East Africa. Next. We highly recommend that an engine with a battery-powered starter and key start be utilized, as this allows women to also be engaged as thresher operators. The difficult cranking of the diesel engine can be a roadblock to female ownership and utilization, but the use of a starter motor eliminates that barrier for women. Next. The thresher can also be run off a tractor power takeoff, which lowers the cost of thresher purchase because it eliminates the need to purchase an engine as a separate power source. One modification when you're using tractor PTO is the pulleys are rearranged for different power ratios. Next. Most of the design specifications developed by SIL are incredibly important to proper machine function, including the feeder size and location and the pulley size or ratio. Pulleys are the hardest part of the thresher to find in African markets and must be correctly sized. If forged from aluminum, a steel insert should be used in the center to attach the pulley to the threshing cylinder shaft. The large pulley you see in the photo must be 14 to 16 inches or 35 to 41 centimeters. Using a smaller pulley will result in the threshing cylinder turning too rapidly and causing seed damage. Next. As we have trained fabricators across 9 countries and worked with stakeholders in field testing, our designers have made modifications from our first designs in 2016. Based on the experiences of common bean farmers in East Africa, we added secondary suction that allows the threshing cylinder to be slowed down to prevent splitting of delicate bean seeds, but still allow significant winnowing and chaff removal. We added a shaft at the feeding port that helps pull in long soybean plants to try to increase soybean threshing capacity. And we addressed concerns in Zambia and Zimbabwe that the trailer the thresher sits on has to be street legal and follow traffic regulations in those countries. Next. The materials and supplies are fairly easy to find in most markets in larger communities or cities and include 2 to 4 millimeter sheet metal, angle iron, an engine, bolts and nuts, and pipe. Pulleys can be a bit of a challenge, but metal forgers can be utilized. Many manufacturers cut costs by using used tires, which often leads to regular flats, so the cost savings has to be measured against the hassle of repairs. Using the proper specifications for materials will lead to a durable thresher that can last decades. Next. The tools required for fabrication are not extensive. At a minimum, the fabricator needs a welding plant and a way to cut metal, usually an angle grinder. As you can see from the photo on the left, angle grinders are aggressive tools that require strength and a lot of practice for safe use. Because we've had female trainees, we adopted a policy of introducing fabricators to plasma cutters, which, as you can see by the photo on the right, are easier and safer for women and really all manufacturers to use to cut metal. Sophisticated manufacturers or local retailers can source plasma cutters from China or South African markets. They're also available for sale in many larger African markets. The cost for a low-end plasma cutter is similar to the cost of an angle grinder. Next. There are other tools that must be available but not necessarily owned by the thresher fabricator. Many fabricators are able to build their own metal rollers, benders, or cutters, but will hire out the work that needs to be done on a lathe, as seen in the upper left photo. or a drill press or metal punch. Other tools, such as a metal chop saw, make the work easier but are not required. In the photo, a female trainee in Uganda is using a chop saw rather than the more aggressive angle grinder to cut metal. Next.
Okay, thank you, Carrie. Now it's time to take a quick break for our second interactive poll. Okay, so as Dr. Clark mentioned, the SIL Multi-Crop Thresher is locally manufactured from locally sourced parts. We want to know, how important is this to you? We'll give everyone a few moments to select their answer. Okay, we still have some people voting. All right, and we'll be closing the poll in 3, 2, 1. Okay, and I can share those results with everyone. Okay, so it looks like this is very important, if not fairly important, to most of our audience today. That's good to know. The Soybean Innovation Lab trains local fabricators to build and service multi-crop threshers using locally sourced parts. So if you're interested in hosting a fabrication training in your country, please contact us following the webinar. You also may want to download the Thresher Fabrication Training Packet that is located in the handouts pane of your GoToWebinar control panel. This will provide more details about the training and contact information. Okay, and with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Mr. Jeffrey Apiage to continue with the presentation.
Thank you very much, Ami. Thank you very much, Dr. Clark. Thank you very much, SIL, and all the attendees for your time. I may be lagged a bit because of my network, but I think I should be good. I would like to continue with the transportation method for the SIL Multi-Crop Thresher. It can be moved by a motor cargo that is seen on the top right of the presentation. It can be pulled along with it, or it can be unassembled as seen on the bottom left. Also, it can be pulled with a truck, pickup truck, or a tractor. So all forms of mobility found in Africa can be used to move these threshers to the farms. Next. The thresher is operated by 2 people or 3 people, but ideally 3 people is best, but you can operate it with 2 people. One stands at the back of the thresher. Next, please. One stands at the back of the thresher and collects the grains and feed it in, while another takes the grains in front of the thresher. That way, the farmers move the thresher and move the grains into the thresher, and the thresher splits the grains, threshes the grains perfectly, and the one standing in front of the thresher collects the grains. Next. How this thresher works: when the grains are placed into the thresher, it's 3 things happen. One, there is an impact of the metal rods, the spikes back onto the thresher that splits up the grain, and there is also a rubbing of the grains against the concave. And then the third process is that the thresher, the plants rub against each other for it to release the grains, the cereals, to fall down nicely. And we use 2 methods to clean these grains. Next slide. Further into how this thresher works, there are a little troubleshooting about it, even that affects its work. But these are the first important ones: the speed of the thresher and the moisture content of the thresher. When the speed of the engine is high, it leads to breakages of the grains. And also when the moisture content is high, you may have incomplete threshing. But however, when the moisture content is also low, there is also incomplete threshing. So these are first 2 critical notes. Next slide, please. Below is a test that was conducted on the previous model of a SIL multi-crop thresher before the secondary section was implemented, and we found that soil had the highest the chaff percentage. That was about 1.8%. However, if I can, in the next slide, I'll show you a feedback from one processor on soil threshed by hand, and so this 1.8% was fairly good to the farmers. And for maize, it was 0.1%, and for rice, it was 0.3%. I would like to reinstate that the new model of the SIL thresher has a secondary suction, and hence we are expecting lower chaff on our next research that we publish on this. Next slide, please. So as I said, the grains you can see is the output from a food processing firm that contains a lot of dirt and dust, and then you can see the post-harvest losses in there. Now all these happened with the traditional threshing, and with the mechanical threshing, all these dirt and stones are eliminated, leading to a high premium prices for farmers, since they do not have to carry stones to be sold. Next slide. To properly run this thresher, you need very good maintenance and operation. So it is very critical to train your operators to man this thresher properly to extend the shelf life of this thresher. Next slide. Troubleshooting. In the handout, you'll find the SIL maintenance and operations manual. Now these instructions there contain also basic troubleshooting that when you buy and own this machine, you can basically go through anytime you have any challenge to make sure that all the machine is functioning very efficiently. This also, you will have to train your operator to make sure he knows all of these. For example, the required RPM to thresh, when the threshing is being done poorly, what to do to make sure all these things are resolved. Still have done the work to make sure all these are provided to ensure the longevity of SIL threshers. Next, please. The lifespan of this SIL thresher is expected to last for decades. However, there are a couple of things you may have to change over time that include belts, bearings, ties, and sometimes, depending on your manufacturer, broken welds over time. But the thresher should last for decades. Next slide. So below is a client's testimonial who happened to have acquired these threshers by a combination of SATEC with our partner, Thresher Tractor. And I'll leave all of us to hear him out as this video plays.
It's scarce in the system. The farmers are happy to see this thresher. And more the happiest part of the story is that this one is a multi-thresher that can thresh maize, soya beans, millet, sorghum, and so on and so forth. So the farmers are very, very happy. We've tested it, and it works. It's very good. It's very, very fast. With maize, we can thresh 20 to 30 bags within an hour. That's 100 kg. And the farmers are now happy with the services that we are providing for them. What the farmers are saying is that they need more of this in our farm plains because it's very scarce, and the few ones around are very old. So, in short, the machine is very, very profitable. Looking at it, we are looking up to thresh around 2,800 bags within the season, and that can help us to gain return on our investment. So we are very, very happy that SATEC have been able to manufacture this multi-thresher that is coming to reduce the workload of our farm plains farmers. Before I end my story, we need more of this. We need more investors to come in to support us. Thank you very much.
Okay, so we are going to go ahead and move on to our very last poll. Thanks, Jeffrey. So I'm going to go ahead and launch that. Okay, so what might be the biggest constraint or challenge for you or potential thresher users regarding the SIL multi-crop thresher? We'll give everyone a few moments to select their answer. Okay, and we'll be closing the poll in 3, 2, 1. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share the results with everyone here. Okay, so it looks at 42% see the cost of the thresher as the biggest constraint or challenge, and then we have 27%, the availability of the thresher in their country. So this is good to know. Thank you for participating in our polls. We really value your input. So I'm going to go ahead and close that, and I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to Dr. Clark.
So thank you. For those of you who said the cost of thresher is a major roadblock for you, please do get on the next webinar that will talk about the profitability, because profitability is an important part of cost. So where would you purchase this thresher? We have established manufacturing in several countries, including Ghana, where Sayatech operates out of Kumasi, and there's also 3 other major manufacturers in the north. There's also established manufacturing in Ethiopia and Zambia, and in Tanzania, Amaratech offers their smaller version of a multi-crop thresher. There's also countries where we have trained fabricators, but they're still working on establishing consistent manufacturing. These include Zimbabwe, Rwanda, Uganda, and Malawi. I've listed the contact person for each country on this slide. You can also contact me at the email below to get their contact information or to get more information about who can manufacture in those countries. Finally, we have training planned in 2021 in Kenya, Nigeria, and Senegal. For training, SIL works with a host country institution who identify and recruit the trainees, arrange the training facility, support the trainees' lunch during the 7-day training, and buy materials for the threshers made at the hands-on training. The sponsor gets to keep the threshers made at the training. SIL provides the trainers and their travel support. For more information on training, again, contact me at the email on the bottom right of the slide. The best people to train are fabricators who are already making some sort of agricultural equipment or tools and who have contacts in ongoing sales in rural areas. Next. Sayatech has been SIL's commercial implementer since 2018. Sayatech is a company of young, very driven entrepreneurs who are working to create international markets for agricultural equipment across Africa. They provide manufacturing service and service provision in Ghana, and in other countries will serve as retailers while working with local fabricators to provide a product with guaranteed high quality. Sayatech has gifted CAD designers and created the SIL fabrication manual as well as the operation and maintenance manual. They're also building a workforce in Ghana of young service providers through their threshing service provision business. Finally, they've developed hardware and software that allows for real-time monitoring of the thresher operation and output via GPS and monitoring hardware that is connected to a smartphone app. To work with Sayatech in your market, you can visit their website at sayatech.io or email Jeffrey directly at jeffrey@sayatech.io. And that is all I have, and so I think Amy will take over.
Great. Thank you, Carrie and Jeffrey. That was a great overview of the capacity and functionality of SIL's multi-crop thresher. So now we're going to go ahead and dive into all those great questions that you've submitted. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to SIL's Associate Director, Courtney Tamimi, who will be moderating today's Q&A.
Thanks, Amy. So we've had a lot of great questions come in, and we're going to get to as many as we can. during this live Q&A session. And if we aren't able to address your question, we will definitely send you an email and respond in writing. So I just wanted to make a quick note before we jump into questions. We've been putting it in the chat pane, but you have a handouts pane in your GoToWebinar control panel. And that handouts pane contains a copy of today's presentation slides, the operations and maintenance manual for the thresher, a briefer on the thresher performance, and some other materials that you might find useful. So be sure to look at the handouts pane of your GoToWebinar control panel. And also feel free to keep sending in your questions. We're taking a look at them, we're acknowledging them, and we'll get to as many as we can. So I'll start, I guess this is a question for both Carrie and Jeffrey, but Joseph Mwangi with USAID in Uganda asked if there's a patent on the thresher.
No, it's an open source design. And so people are welcome to make it and sell it under their own brand or however they want.
Great. Olga Antoine from the Sasakwa Africa Association in Mali asked about the recommended moisture content for soybean, sorghum, and maize threshing.
Jeffrey, you want to take that one?
Yeah. So the recommended moisture content for soybean is around 12 to 14%. Around 12 to 14%. For maize, it's usually a little higher. You could do it around 16%. And those should also be similar for sorghum, right? Sorghum and millet.
And you can, the machine will thresh at a variety of moistures, but if it's too moist, it tends to clog up. And that's true of all machines, including like a combine in the United States. And then if it's too dry, it will tend to split. So that's the issues with trying to hit pretty good moisture levels.
Okay, thanks. We had kind of a merged question from a few different attendees who submitted questions when they registered about different crops that the SIL Multi-Crop Thresher can handle. So they wanted to know specifically about mung bean, millet, sesame, chai, and baobab pulp.
Okay, so on sesame is a fairly small crop or small seeded crop. The small seeded crops, the thresher can thresh, but the issue that you have is that if the seed and the chaff are about the same weight, that the seed could be exited with the chaff. And so that's where I said in the slide that you probably want to reduce the suction levels or even eliminate suction and do hand winnowing. So all the small crops like the chia, the sesame, those would all be true. It will thresh it. Mung bean, the dicotyledonous crops that have, they're basically your broadleaf crops, which have the seed, which is most of your beans and soybeans and those kind of thing. They have pretty thin seed coats and can break easily during threshing. So that includes like common bean and mung bean, pigeon pea, soybean. So for those, that's why we added the secondary suction fan so that you could slow down the threshing operation as much as possible so as not to break those. Yes, it definitely will thresh mung bean. It's just that you have to go slow so it doesn't break. The grasses or the monocots like sorghum, corn, or maize, millet, those things, those seeds are all in one piece, and so they don't break easily. So you can do those at a faster speed. Baobab pulp, Jeffrey, you're gonna have to take that one. I don't even really know is that threshing of baobab seeds, or I don't know.
Baobab. So I will have to find out on that one. I'll have to find out on that one. And also whether I would take this opportunity to give a feedback on the previous one. The person that sent the moisture contents is within the operation and maintenance manual. I could also, after this, we could also send it to you so you see the specific moisture contents for different grains that we have.
Great, thank you. So we wanted to know.
And we'll get, sorry.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
I wanted to say we'll get, I'll also get the feedback on the baobab seed. the baobab crop for the.
It said baobab pulp.
So I just want to keep moving. Another attendee, this is Benedict Olawumi from Grow in West Africa, based in Ghana, asked why the SIL multi-crop thresher isn't built for individual smallholder farmers, and why you guys decided to have it be a little bit of a larger size that would be more appropriate for a service provider or a larger scale farmer.
So when we started this program, we kind of fashioned it after some women in Upper West who had Hakeem build a thresher for them, and he was able to build it fairly inexpensively, but it wasn't a very durable thresher. But we tried for that same model and something that people could afford. And what we came up with was a small thresher that still costed about $650. So there's several problems with that. One, $650 is still expensive, and that is the cheapest that we could buy all the materials for. And that was a very small engine. And then what happened when we field tested it was people tried to shove too much material into it. And this, like 100% across the board, people tried to do more than it was capable of doing. And then that's when we got community feedback that they just weren't interested in that small of a thresher, even for the price point. They said they'd rather pay more and have a thresher that could provide business opportunities for people in their communities. If you'll notice the Amara Tech thresher, that one costs about $750. It also is a much smaller thresher, but that just the feedback that we got was that people wanted to use this as a money-making business, and Amara Tech has also told me that, you know, they, even at the low price of $750, it's still hard for smallholder farmers to purchase it. So you either have to go so cheap that it's unusable, or you go big and it becomes a profit-making thing for a service provider, and that's where we feel the best opportunity is for smallholder farmers.
Great, thanks. Let's see, Mohammed Abdul Wahid with WARC Group in Ghana asked if you had to note one thing that primarily distinguishes the SIL multi-crop thresher from others on the market, what would be those kind of defining characteristics?
I think so. A lot of the threshers that you see built, first of all, ours is built locally. There are other threshers built locally. The way those people got at those designs were they reverse engineered. So like a thresher, an imported thresher would come into their community, and a fabricator would go out, take pictures, maybe draw some designs, and basically try to figure out how to build it from one that was built somewhere else. The problem with that is that you can miss important aspects. So ours has been we didn't reverse engineer ours, so it was forward engineered, and it's been heavily field tested to make sure that it works properly for every crop, and where there's been issues, we've made modifications. So we have seen other multi-crop threshers in use in Ghana, and that were, you know, sold as multi-crop threshers, but maybe, you know, like I've seen one that had probably 50% seed loss in maize, worked okay for soybean, but, you know, huge loss in other crops. And so ours has been engineered to have very low levels of chaff, and to have very, very low levels of seed loss or damage. So, but as I said, you know, all local fabrication should be supported. But yeah, there are some differences, and just I think the amount of research and testing we've put into it, and to make sure it's right for farmers, is one of the big things.
That's great, thanks. We've got more questions, but I just want to interject and note that this is part one of a 3-part symposium that we're running today. So the next session will be on profitability, which really looks at how can service providers and other owner operators of the thresher be profitable. So Rachel, if you can put that again in the chat, the link to join. And then after the profitability session, the third and final part of our symposium will focus on gender and how you can achieve gender balance in thresher rollout programs. So particularly looking at women's cooperative ownership. And then also, I do want to just make sure people can access the documents in the handouts pane, which has the presentation materials from today. So Carrie and Jeffrey, Osman Abdel Rahman with GDCA in Ghana wanted to know about the availability of spare parts for maintaining and repairing the thresher? Are they available? Is it difficult to find? Is it costly? How do you go about the availability of spare parts for the thresher?
So the parts are belts, pulleys, no, not pulleys. Jeffrey, you want to take it? It's belts and bearings mostly, and they're readily available. But
Yeah.
Jeffrey, you want to?
Yeah, I think that was said exactly right, Dr. Clark. Yeah, all parts are readily available because they are all sourced locally.
Okay, great. MadTrack Ocon with KNUST in Ghana. I think this is something you touched on, Carrie, but if you can reiterate about the lifespan of the thresher and also operational capacity. So, you know, we can go back and show that slide, or if you can just touch on that, that'd be great.
So we'll just start with operational capacity. Maize, you can do about 20 to 30 or even more 100 kg bags an hour. So that's 2 to 3,000 kilograms an hour. Soybean runs quite a bit less because you have to feed the whole plant in. What was the first part of the question?
The first part was about the lifespan.
Oh, the lifespan. Okay. So I actually, I use threshers in my job at the University of Missouri, which is as a soybean breeder, and I have a thresher that I've been using, or that has been in use since the 1940s. So for 80 years, a thresher made with the proper specifications that we have spelled out in our fabrication manual should last decades, so 30, 40, 50 years. But as we said during the talk, there will be parts that wear out, like you do have to replace belts and bearings. But the bulk of the machine, of course, the engine will depend on how well you maintain the engine too, but the bulk of the machine can last decades.
Okay, great, thank you. Let's see, Samuel Aziz from the Federal University of Agriculture in Nigeria wanted to know about how effective the thresher is when dealing with breeder seed and maybe seed that you want to avoid any contamination with, so any type of research program.
Okay, so you would have, if you were going to switch from variety to variety, so if you were doing, let's say you're doing seed increases, it would be fine. You make sure you run it at a speed that's not going to damage the seed. You would need to pop the lid open and do a clean out between each variety. It would be a little harder for plot seed where you're just running small amounts, and every couple of minutes you're changing varieties, because it could collect some seed in the bottom of the sieve. But for the most part, if you're doing larger breeder increases, it should be fine.
Okay, great. And then there's a few people asking about specific contacts in their country. Nidikumana wanted to know about getting the thresher into Burundi. Happy Sikalengo was looking at contacts in Tanzania. So I just wanted to encourage those people asking that if you get in touch with us after the webinar, we can put you directly in contact with fabricators, but also there's a fabricator list contained in the presentation materials today, and you can access those in the handouts pane of the GoToWebinar control panel. I'll ask another question. So this is from Francis Amoa, and he's asking, what is the overall weight of the equipment as it affects handling and transport?
So the weight of the equipment is 650 kg.
And you do need, like, I think Francis is from Ghana, right? So you do need like a Motor King or cargo motorcycle to pull it from farm to farm. So it does have a pretty stable trailer that we pull it on. For long distance hauling, it can be disassembled into 3 pieces: the chassis along with the axles and the motor, and then the rest can be taken off if you need to, if you want to put it in the back of a pickup for long distance hauling. But for farm to farm, you usually tow it. In Zambia, they're actually towing it with an oxen. And I think the plan also in Ethiopia is that they tow it with an oxen. But it's a little bit too heavy. You can push it just, if you want to just go a few meters or something, you can push it by hand. I have talked to some people in Ghana that go from farm to farm by pushing by hand, which is hard work. But normally something like a cargo motorcycle.
Great. And yeah, that question was, sorry, I forgot to give, that was from Francis based in Ghana with KNUST. Another question comes from Innocent Malunga with the African Agricultural Technology Foundation based in Malawi. And they're asking about the cost of the thresher potentially being a roadblock for procuring it. They're asking specifically about smallholder farmers, but as we've noted, the size of the SIL Multi-Crop Thresher is not always the best for an individual smallholder farmer. But Dr. Clark and Jeffrey, have there been methods that you've seen that have worked to help address the challenge of the initial upfront cost of the thresher?
Yeah.
Dr. Clark, you want to go first? Yeah.
Okay. So cost share programs, of course, are always a help. We do have some manufacturers in some places that will take 50% down, 25% on delivery, and then the other 25% after the first season. The thresher, if you stay around for the second seminar, you'll find out that the thresher can actually get paid back from, through threshing in 1 year. So it is highly profitable, which balances off the cost. Unfortunately, Malawi was one of the places where we worked that had one of the highest costs, being a landlocked country. There was some, like the engine was very expensive there. But I think people need to I think, first of all, I think there's going to be some changes in African customs as they open up economies. And so customs duties is always an issue, but transport's also an issue. But yes, it has a high cost, but it's a highly profitable machine too. So you get your return on investment in one season. So Jeffrey, you want to comment?
No, I think you said it very, very right. And yeah, there are banks also willing to provide leasing options too. So
and one other thing,
yeah,
one other thing, it seems like a lot of people here are thinking, well, why didn't you do one for a smallholder farmer? This does make threshing available to smallholder farmers at a price that they can afford, which is usually the cost of threshing from the service provider is 10% of the grain that's threshed, which is what they're already paying for hand threshing in most cases. So this makes a machine readily available to smallholder farmers at an affordable price, which building them for individual farmers at this point in many rural economies is not very feasible, because you don't end up with a usable machine. You end up with a machine that's not as fast as hand threshing, and so you haven't solved the problem. So doing the service provision model solves the problem for smallholder farmers.
Thanks.
And Dr. Clark is...
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Okay, so I think I'm lagged in a little bit late. Sorry. It's also more expensive to do the hand threshing, as the farmers have told us. So farmers we are working with within the Kumasi regions did the math themselves and told us that it's actually cheaper for them to use the machine to thresh.
Thank you. Yeah, so we've got, again, we've got another session of this symposium at the top of the hour. So please do join us for that. The links to join are in the chat, and the next session focuses on the profitability of the thresher. So I'm going to try and get to 2 more questions, and then we'll probably have to wrap up. Liman Khatun with the Nice Oil Processing Company in Nigeria wanted to know about training. So Carrie, I think it would help if you gave the audience just a quick briefer on what is needed to host a training, a thresher fabrication training, what SIL provides, what the host is expected to provide, just for I think a lot of people are interested in that.
Okay, so for the training, the host agency, and I should say that in some countries like Nigeria, we have numerous people that are interested in hosting trainings. And so if they contact me, we can try to put those people together and share a hosting. But the host locates the trainees, and those should be people that have some advanced manufacturing experience, at least, making like donkey plows or maybe grinders or mills or something like that. It has not worked well in places where the trainees only make doors and windows. They don't have enough usually skill or contacts to become manufacturers. But so the host finds the trainees, they find the facility. Usually it's a vocational facility, and usually that facility will allow free use of their facility in exchange for us training their people also. We ask at a minimum that the trainee support and trainer support be a midday snack and a lunch, because we don't want people to leave the facility, because it's very long days, 7 days. We can build 1 to 3 threshers during that training. We need at least 5 good technically skilled people per thresher that we build. So if you only want to train 6 people, we're only going to build 1 thresher. If you want to train 20, we can build 3. The host also pays for the materials, or somebody in the country there pays for the materials, but then they also get to keep the threshers that are manufactured. And then SIL provides the trainers, and we support the trainer costs. So it's actually not very expensive for the host, depending on how many threshers they want to make, and quite expensive for SIL. So we're making an investment in your community, and hope that you will then, after the training, follow through with those trainees to help build a manufacturing infrastructure there.
Great, and that information on the thresher training is also included in a packet that's also in the handouts portion of this, of your GoToWebinar control panel. So last question, so Lydia Horn from the University of Namibia wanted to know if the thresher is capable of grading and sorting grains, as she's in the seed industry.
She probably wants to contact Jeffrey personally, because so the SIL thresher that we teach people to build right now is the simplest design. That it's a complicated design, but it also has many characteristics that are just as simple as we could get it. For instance, we don't have a shaker sieve for grain cleaning, because it adds a lot of complication, and there's no way we could do the training in 7 days, and the cost would go up. However, Jeff's company, Sayatech, does have some modifications that would make it more appropriate for her uses. So I think they should probably talk.
Yeah, I can put them in contact. So I think we've got to stop there, because we have another webinar at the top of the hour. Amy, I'll turn it back over to you, but thanks everyone for the wonderful questions, and thanks to the panelists for the really insightful feedback.
Yeah, and if anybody has any further want to discuss with me there, tell them to please email me.
Will do. Okay, well, thanks everyone. This concludes the first session of our Multi-Crop Thresher Webinar Symposium on Performance. Thank you so much for your participation. Please consider joining us for the next session on profitability, which is beginning shortly. The link to register, as Courtney mentioned, has been provided in the chat box. Today's webinar has been recorded, and a link to the recording will be sent to you in a follow-up email. When you exit the webinar today, you'll be asked to complete a short exit survey. We really appreciate all of your feedback and the time you've spent with us. So please just take a few moments to complete the survey. Thank you so much for joining us, and have a great rest of your day or evening. Stay safe and healthy out there.